Hello. Welcome. My name's Kara Goodwin, and I'm the host of the Soul Elevation podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in. I want to talk today about near death experiences and what we can learn from them and apply to them. And one of the things I want to do is zoom out because there are so many amazing near death experiences. I'll link after I finish recording this. I'll link several that I've had on the podcast over the years, but I've had several lately, which is why this is top of mind. I just had one with Vinnie Tolman that I released yesterday, 392. I had Dr. Michael Hessian before that, which was 391. Ken Lloyd a couple of times before that. Um, and many over time. And when I was younger, like when I was a child, I remember when I first started hearing about near death experiences, and they really drew me in. I was really captivated by these stories because I think a lot of people are very curious about what happens when we die. Does life keep going? And I feel like maybe particularly as a child, like things are so new as you're learning things and you're trying to figure things out, and that's a huge mystery. And then I stumbled upon people who had actually experienced what it was like to go to the other side and come back and had tales to tell. And particularly those first ones were so impactful because they were the first ones that I'd been exposed to. And typically, what I would hear is people would come back and they'd have these revelations, they'd have lessons, or they'd understand what life was about. And common things were love. It's about love. Um, and over time, particularly more recently, as an adult, while and particularly through all the interviews that I've done on this topic, different people have different things that they come back with. So, um, Vinnie Tolman, for example, if you read his book, The Light After Death, I think is what it's called. Um, he talks about acceptance and letting go of judgment. And that was a huge learning. He came back and he's like, love, the point of life is acceptance. It's to stop judging. And Michael Hessian, his was actually less about the experience. He first of all, he experienced a tremendous amount of fear. He had the perspective of being a doctor, working with critically ill people. He understood from that perspective as he was in the hospital and he was shutting down, he was terrified because he knew these signs. He knew this is what happens before people die. I'm going to die. And he says on the podcast, I was terrified. That's an understatement, that I was terrified. But as he felt his energy leaving his body and he felt that he was being pulled by this force, that fear left him and he felt incredible peace and incredible calmness. And then he had a very short experience with a being in a tunnel, but what he got from it was really more about the experience of being on the edge of consciousness and how much he was able to perceive, and how the interactions with the medical staff and with family were so different when people treated him like a person versus treating him like a vegetable, where they weren't even considering that he could hear them or perceive anything about them, and they were just talking to him like he was an object. So for him, that has then informed him as a doctor and his purpose now in making sure that other medical professionals and family members who are caring for people in states like that understand that they are perceiving things and how important, like the state that they're in, and how much they need to understand. They need communication. They need to know that they're not alone. They're feeling scared, but they can't express themselves. So for him, that was a big takeaway, and it was life changing. For other people, it may be that they feel love. They come back and they're like, the point of life is love. And maybe they had had a life where it was, they were very much focused on perfectionism or success by financial standards, and they weren't inviting love into their life. And so through their near death experience, they have this newfound understanding of like, wait, material success doesn't mean anything. It's all about the love. Ken Lloyd, I think that was 389, episode 389, I believe. He was a very, successful and driven and hugely, hugely stressed um, entrepreneur. And he had his near death experience and his was also similar to Dr. Michael Hessian. Um, he didn't really have like the full blown going to the other side. It took him actually a while to realize that he'd undergone that that near death experience through this what he talks about in the podcast where he was like lifted up by his belly. But he had this huge shift coming out of that experience of like, wait a minute, I'm chasing the wrong thing and my life is off track. So when we take those are just like a very tiny amount of the stories that are out there, of course, but there's not one there's not one point to these experiences, which is how I viewed them when I was little. I would think, oh, somebody's been to the other side and they figured out why we're here. And this applies to everybody. And yes, these are universal things. We're going to be happier and more connected to our soul if we release our judgments and we come more fully into acceptance. And if we renounce material success if we don't idolize material success the way that we tend to in the West, if we let go of our fear, if we are more loving, all of those are going to lead us to a more soul filled life. But I believe that we're all our unique expressions of the divine. We're all here with our own purpose, our own lessons. In a future podcast that's coming out in 2 weeks with Franco Romano, who is just amazing. He also is an NDEer, and he talks about life as a game, and other people talk about life as a school. So, but the point being, there is purpose here for us in these human expressions. But I believe it's all different. We're all here for different reasons. Not every human of the 9 billion or however many, how many billions of us are there? Somebody knows out there. However many billions of humans there are out here, we're not all here for the same thing. We're not all the same expression of source. We all have our unique expression of source. We all have our own gifts, and we all came here for specific reasons. So for some people, it might be that their life experience has brought them a lot of opportunities to come out of judgment. And that's been a real focus. That was a big purpose of why they incarnated. For somebody else, it might be, I want to experience love as a human with that kind of, all the temptations of the five senses and the temptations to only experience life through the five senses. That may be somebody else's purpose and opportunity as a soul. And also when it comes to the experiences, the actual experiences that people have when they die. So, there's often a tunnel of light. They're met by beings or family members, or they might find themselves, in front of a council. That's another thing that when I was younger and I was reading these stories, I really hung on to what people experienced in terms of, okay, first you're met by a guardian angel, or you're met by Jesus, or you're met by, your grandfather or whatever it was. And then you go and see a council and you do a life review. And then you go into, Dr. Eben Alexander, can't remember which episode I talked to him on, but I'll put that link in here when I'm finished recording too. But, he had this amazing experience of like flying over this beautiful valley and meadow and hearing all of these songs and that was his experience. But it's I have had to overcome the tendency that I have to, like, clutch to some of these stories and think, "Okay, that's what happens." Like, that is what happens when I die, and then I come across another story, and it may have, like, a totally different um, experience, like something, like what Dr. Evan Alexander experienced may be vastly different from what the next NDE experience is that I hear about. And the temptation can be to not believe what I have not already been exposed to think that that person is not remembering correctly or making it up or somehow misinformed because I've adopted somebody else's experience and held so strongly to it. Something that I've had to work on is kind of releasing those judgments and understanding that, again, it's not like you go to Target, a big store here in America, and we're roughly experiencing the same Target, wherever you are across the country. You walk through the automatic doors and, you're gonna see a Starbucks right there and their checkout lines right there, and it's there's pretty much a default. I believe that when we exit the human experience, that also is to some extent a unique experience for us. Now, I do believe that there is a grand intelligent, like a vastly intelligent design that is universal, that's underlying everything. But I think that we are all unique expressions of spirit and of source, and we have different frequencies, we have different homes, we have our different soul homes, different soul levels, different, which means that we might have different experiences when we die that vary from person to person, but it doesn't mean that our experience is incorrect or somebody else's experience that varies is incorrect. But I mean, even so, I think it's very helpful. I think it's helpful to loosen our the way that we might attach ourselves to somebody else's story, but also there's just so many gifts in these near death experiences that we can absorb because there is a frequency that these near death experiencers are bringing back and conveying to us even beyond the story that we might hear, the intellect, the mental picture that we might have built and the emotional response that might put that might give us, the comfort that gives to us. I mean, it is really, really comforting to hear these stories and to be and just to, I mean, to know that there is more to life and that when we die, that's not the end. That's hugely, hugely comforting because as a human being, that's not really, at least in our society and in our evolution at the moment, it's not a given that we all understand that or accept that. So when people come back with these experiences where they're sharing from the other side, yes, life carries on. That's a huge, huge gift. And that's something that is like a comforting blanket to wrap around ourselves that nourishes us. But there is also a frequency and an energy that they bring back that we integrate into our own energy, and that's impalpable and really can only be described to a certain extent. But what a huge gift! So I thank you so much for tuning in here, and I will put those links to those episodes in the chat in the notes because you may want to explore this further. And I wish you a beautiful rest of your day. Many, many blessings.